I remember the day I met Alex as vividly as if it were happening all over again. It was one of those overcast, unremarkable afternoons where everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. I had sought refuge in a dingy little cafe, the kind of place where the air was thick with the scent of burnt coffee and old wood. The lights were dim, casting a warm, amber glow over the worn-out furniture, and the few patrons scattered around the room seemed lost in their own worlds. I was no different, just another person trying to piece together the fragments of my scattered thoughts. I had ordered the cheapest cup of coffee they had, more out of habit than necessity, and was sipping it slowly, letting the lukewarm liquid help me focus. My mind was a whirlpool of unfinished plans, half-baked ideas, and lingering doubts. I wasn't paying much attention to my surroundings, the low hum of conversations and the occasional clatter of dishes blending into a comforting background noise. Then, just as I was getting lost in my thoughts, the door swung open, and he walked in. It wasn't a grand entrance, not the kind you see in movies where everything goes silent, and the spotlight focuses on the leading man. No, it was far more subtle. The only thing that marked his arrival was the gentle jingle of the bell above the door, its sound somehow sharper against the quiet murmur of the cafe. As he stepped inside, the scent of his aftershave, something fresh, with a hint of spice, mingled with the stale coffee, creating a strange but oddly pleasant mix. He stood there for a moment, scanning the room with a curious gaze, and then his eyes locked on mine. He had a smile that seemed effortless, as if it came naturally to him, and in that moment, it felt like the world around me had shifted slightly. He walked over to my table with an easy confidence, as if this was something he did every day. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. His voice was warm, laced with a friendliness that immediately put me at ease. For a second, I struggled to find my voice. There was something about his presence that was both disarming and intriguing. "Looks free to me," I finally managed to say, trying to keep my tone casual, though inside, I could feel my heart rate picking up. As he sat down, I noticed the small details, his slightly tousled hair, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the faint stubble on his jawline. There was an air of familiarity about him, like meeting an old friend after years apart, even though we had never met before. We started talking, and it was as if we had known each other for years. There was no awkwardness, no stumbling over words. The conversation flowed naturally, effortlessly. He shared my taste in the most unlikely things, trashy TV shows that we both loved to hate watch, guilty pleasures we were embarrassed to admit to anyone else. We found ourselves laughing at the same jokes, debating the most ridiculous topics, like the merits of pineapple on pizza. "Pineapple on pizza is a travesty," I declared, trying to sound serious, but he just grinned and said, "Fight me." As the minutes turned into hours, I realized how rare it was to connect with someone so deeply, so quickly. It was as if we were cut from the same cloth, two pieces of a puzzle that had finally found each other. Our casual meetups turned into dates, and those dates became something much more serious. Before I knew it, I was in a relationship that felt as comfortable and natural as slipping into your favorite pair of worn-out jeans. Things escalated quickly between us, and soon, we were talking about the future, about getting married, about building a life together. It all seemed so easy, so right, as if this was exactly where we were meant to be. But then came the inevitable meeting with his parents, and that's when everything started to get complicated. Meeting his parents was like walking into a lion's den. The moment I stepped through the door, I could feel the tension in the air, as if I was being judged from the second they laid eyes on me. His mother had this way of looking at you that made you feel small, like she was scrutinizing every detail and finding you lacking. And his father, well, he was no better. They were both impeccably polite, but their smiles never reached their eyes. "So, you're the girl Alex can't stop talking about," his mother said, her voice laced with something that was far from welcoming. It was a statement, not a question, and the way she said it made it clear that she wasn't entirely pleased. "Guilty as charged," I replied, forcing a smile, though inside I was anything but calm. I could feel their eyes on me, weighing me, assessing me, trying to decide if I was worthy of their son. It was an uncomfortable, almost suffocating experience, but I did my best to keep my cool. They didn't waste any time getting to the point. It was almost as if they had rehearsed this, laying out their conditions as if it were a business deal. They wanted us to sign a prenuptial agreement before we got married, to protect their family's assets. The way they presented it, so cold and calculated, made my blood boil. I wasn't interested in Alex's money. I loved him for who he was, not for what he had. But the implication that I might be after their wealth was infuriating. "Fine, I'll sign your prenup," I said, my voice steady, "but I have one condition: if either of us cheats, the cheater has to pay the other $100,000. The room fell silent. Alex looked at me in shock, as if I had just suggested something outrageous. His eyes widened, and he opened his mouth to protest. "Babe, I would never cheat on you," he said, his voice full of sincerity. I looked back at him, my expression firm. "That's what my ex said too, right before I caught him in the act," I replied, my voice tinged with a bitterness that I hadn't intended to reveal. "So, it's this or nothing." There was a long, tense pause. I could see the discomfort in his parents' eyes, but I didn't back down. Eventually, they agreed, though the look on their faces told me they weren't happy about it. We thought that settling the matter would be the end of the tension, but we were wrong. Things were only just beginning to unravel. Life went on, and we tried to put the unpleasantness behind us. Alex and I moved in together, and our little apartment became our sanctuary. We didn't have much, a few mismatched pieces of furniture, a kitchen that was too small, and an old, rickety couch that we had picked up at a yard sale. That couch was a disaster waiting to happen, its springs creaking ominously every time we sat down, but it became our favorite spot in the whole place. Every evening, after long days at work, we would cuddle up on that couch, wrapped in each other's arms, and talk about everything and nothing. The TV would be on, but we rarely paid attention to it. Instead, we dreamed about the future, about the trips we wanted to take, the places we wanted to see. One of our favorite fantasies was a trip to Italy, a place we both longed to visit, even though we knew we couldn't afford it. "Alex, just imagine it," I would say, my voice filled with excitement. "The food, the wine, the art, everything about it would be perfect. We have to go." He would laugh, pulling me closer, his arm wrapped around my shoulders. "Emily, babe, you had me at food, but let's be real, our bank account is more camping in the backyard than romantic getaway to Venice." I would nudge him playfully, refusing to let go of the dream. "So we'll save. We'll cut back on things we don't need, like your video games." He would gasp in mock horror, clutching his chest dramatically. "Not the video games. Take my shirts, my shoes, even my beloved coffee maker, but leave the games." And then we would laugh, the kind of deep, belly laughs that make your sides hurt. In those moments, despite the challenges we faced, despite the uncertainty of the future, I felt like we had everything we needed. We had each other, and that was more than enough. Alone together, we often found ourselves lost in laughter, a shared joy that seemed to define us. It was a beautiful contradiction. While we dreamed of grand futures, we were always rooted in the reality of our modest lives. Our apartment, with its worn furniture and mismatched decor, served as a canvas for our dreams, yet it felt like a cocoon where we found contentment. We didn't care about the lack of extravagance. Our happiness was a vibrant tapestry woven from both the grand gestures and the tiny, everyday moments. Saturday mornings were particularly special. I can still picture Alex in the kitchen, a place he rarely ventured, fumbling with pots and pans like a child playing dress-up. He couldn't cook to save his life, but he had somehow mastered the simple yet elusive art of scrambled eggs and toast. I would wake up to the sound of him clattering dishes together, a symphony of chaos that made me smile. His breakfast would arrive on the table, a plate filled with the eggs, fluffy yet slightly overcooked, and toast that was often burnt at the edges, paired with a cup of his notoriously terrible coffee. But none of that mattered. The ritual itself was what I cherished. "Hey, I'm thinking scrambled eggs today. What do you think?" he'd call out, his voice bright and cheerful, already drifting into the kitchen as if the very act of cooking filled him with an irresistible enthusiasm. "Only if you promise not to burn the toast this time." I'd shout back, my voice tinged with playful sarcasm. I would then add with a smirk, "And I'm making the coffee." Those mornings felt like the perfect encapsulation of our life together, filled with laughter, small mishaps, and a sense of warmth that made everything else fade into the background. One Saturday, as we stood side by side, our hands submerged in soapy water while washing the dishes, an unexpected heaviness settled over us. The task felt mundane, yet it was elevated by the simple fact that we were doing it together, our bodies moving in rhythm, a silent communication passing between us. It was then that Alex broke the comfortable silence that wrapped around us like a cozy blanket. "Emily, we need to talk about, starting a family," he said, his tone turning serious, a hint of vulnerability flickering in his eyes. I froze, my hand gripping a plate, water dripping from my fingers. "I know," I finally replied, my voice quiet. It's scary, isn't it? What if we can't?" He turned to face me fully, drying his hands on a dish towel, his expression steady and sincere. "Then we'll deal with it together. But we won't know until we try, right? I mean, how hard can it be?" His words were meant to comfort, yet they hung in the air like a challenge. A nervous laugh escaped my lips, laced with a mixture of love and anxiety. Famous last words, babe. But that was how we had always been. No matter the challenge we faced, we confronted it together, hand in hand, hearts intertwined. As the months rolled on, the conversations about starting a family grew more frequent, but not in the way I had hoped. Alex's mother, ever the well-meaning but intrusive figure, began dropping hints with an alarming regularity. "Emily, darling, when are you going to give me some grandbabies? You're not getting any younger, you know," she would say, her voice sweet and nurturing, yet her underlying urgency unmistakable. Every time she brought it up, I would bite my tongue, forcing a polite smile while my insides churned. "We're working on it, aren't we, Alex?" I would say, desperate to deflect her concerns, hoping he would jump in to lighten the mood. And he always did, his tone protective yet exasperated. "Yeah, Mom, lay off, will you? These things take time." His words felt like a shield against the mounting pressure, but as the year wore on, that pressure began to build not just from his mother, but from within ourselves. We both wanted a family, it was a shared dream that danced in our hearts, but the reality of making that dream come true felt increasingly distant. It was frustrating, compounded by the incessant reminders from outside voices, and the unrelenting weight of expectation that seemed to follow us everywhere. Ever since Judy had found her new hobby of making my life a living hell, our home had transformed into a battleground, a place where tension simmered just below the surface. Her sharp tongue was the primary weapon in her arsenal, leaving us feeling vulnerable and exhausted. In those moments, I often wondered if we were truly ready for the journey ahead, not just in starting a family, but in facing the world together. Yet, deep down, I knew that as long as we had each other, we could navigate whatever challenges lay ahead. It wasn't just the occasional jab anymore, it had escalated into an all-out war, each day marked by fresh assaults on my self-esteem and my role as a wife. The tension reached its boiling point one Sunday during what was supposed to be a laid-back and peaceful lunch, an event that quickly spiraled into chaos. Judy arrived uninvited, her timing impeccable, just as Alex and I were about to sit down. The moment she stepped through the door, the atmosphere shifted. It felt as though the air had thickened, charged with an invisible tension that wrapped around us like a heavy blanket. Her eyes scanned the room as if she were about to conduct a military inspection, taking in every detail with critical precision. "Well, isn't this quaint?" she began, her voice dripping with sarcasm, as she looked over the modest spread I had prepared. "You really outdid yourself, Emily. I can see you've been slaving away in the kitchen all morning." Her eyes met mine for a brief moment, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth, and I felt the weight of her judgment pressing down on me. Trying to maintain some semblance of peace, I forced a smile, my heart racing. "It's nothing fancy, Judy, just something simple and quick." "Please, have a seat," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. But as we settled around the table, the barrage began in earnest. "You know, Emily," Judy said, her tone oozing condescension, "I was talking to Mrs. Henderson the other day. She mentioned her grandson was just born, and it got me thinking, when are you and Alex going to give me some good news? It's not like you're getting any younger." The heat rushed to my cheeks, a flush of embarrassment mixed with indignation. I glanced at Alex, silently pleading for him to intervene, to defend me. But instead, he suddenly found the contents of his plate incredibly fascinating, avoiding my gaze. "Mom, come on," he finally muttered, his voice half-hearted, as if he were merely trying to defuse the situation rather than actually stand up for me. Judy plowed on, relentless in her critique. "And Alex, dear, I don't mean to be cruel, but you're not a charity. You work hard for your money, why waste it on Emily if she can't even handle her basic duties as a wife? A cleaning service and a cook would be much more efficient, don't you think?" The moment her words registered, a rush of anger surged within me, and I felt my defenses crumbling. That was when I could no longer hold back. "Judy, I am trying my best here. It's not like I don't want to have kids. As for the house and my cooking, I didn't realize marriage was a service contract." The words came out more heated than I intended, but the frustration bubbled over. Judy scoffed, her disdain palpable, dismissing my protest with a wave of her hand. "Well, it's not a free ride either, Emily. You have responsibilities, and you're clearly not fulfilling them." The room grew heavy with tension, the silence thick enough to cut with a knife, and I felt the sting of tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. But what hurt the most was Alex's silence, his refusal to defend me in that moment. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to stand by my side. "Yeah, Mom has a point. Maybe we should consider getting some help around here. It would make things easier for you too." His words felt like a betrayal, slicing through the remaining threads of my composure. I was utterly alone in this battle. In the days that followed, Judy's visits became more frequent, each one laced with sharper and more cutting criticism. She would saunter through our home, inspecting every corner with a critical eye, as if searching for flaws. "You call this clean?" she would scoff, her tone dripping with disbelief. "My eyes must be deceiving me because this looks like a pigsty." Then came the comments about my appearance, her words meant to belittle and demean. Is that what you're wearing? You know a wife should dress to please her husband. It's no wonder Alex is always so tired, he has to come home to this. My heart raced with anger and humiliation. I tried to fight back, desperation creeping into my voice. Judy, I don't dress for Alex, I dress for myself. He's always so tired because he works hard, not because of what I wear. But it was like talking to a brick wall. Judy had already made up her mind about me, and nothing I said could penetrate the fortress she had built around her judgments. The most painful part of this entire ordeal was Alex's stance, or rather, his glaring lack of one. Each night after his mother's departure, we would find ourselves in heated arguments, the tension spilling over like a boiling pot. Why won't you stand up for me, Alex? She's walking all over us, and you're just letting her. Emily, she's old-fashioned. What do you want me to do, kick my own mom out? He countered, his tone defensive. No, but I want you to be my husband. I need you to stand by me, not her. My voice rose in frustration, and I could feel the weight of my disappointment pressing down on me. It was clear that this was more than just about Judy, it was a rift in our marriage that threatened to consume us both. Disapproval hung between us like an unwelcome guest, its presence a constant reminder of the fractures in our marriage. It wasn't merely about my feelings but rather the unspoken question of whether we were strong enough to withstand the relentless onslaught of Judy's criticisms. With each passing day, I felt the tension build, transforming what began as an irritant into a full-blown siege on our relationship. As days bled into weeks, the realization settled in, this was not just a troubling phase we were experiencing but a potential turning point that could unravel everything we had worked for. If we didn't act quickly, there might soon be nothing left to save. The atmosphere in our home had shifted dramatically since Judy escalated her campaign of critique. It wasn't just the biting remarks and unsolicited advice that created friction, it was the palpable change in Alex, who had begun to exhibit strange behavior. His demeanor was not just the result of work-related stress, this was something deeper, an unsettling change that made my stomach twist in knots. It all began with the phone calls. Alex had always been an open book when it came to his phone, we shared everything, and secrets were non-existent between us. However, he had started to excuse himself from the room every time his phone rang. The caller ID consistently read, John Work, and each time I saw it, a knot of suspicion tightened in my gut. One evening, trying to mask my anxiety, I asked, who's John Work? I aimed for casual, but my voice trembled slightly. Alex flinched at my question, a small yet unmistakable sign that something was amiss. Oh, just a new guy at the office. Lots of questions to answer, he replied, his voice betraying a hint of defensiveness. But the discomfort didn't end there. The transformation in Alex's appearance was equally unsettling. He had never been one to fuss over fashion, but suddenly, he seemed obsessed with his looks. The once familiar sight of him in graphic tees and worn-out jeans was replaced by a wardrobe of crisp shirts and tailored slacks. He even began wearing cologne, a change so stark it left me bewildered. Since when had he cared about smelling like he stepped out of a department store? I attempted to inject humor into the situation to mask my concern. What's with the new look, Alex? Got a job interview or something? I teased one morning as I watched him comb his hair in an unfamiliar style. He offered a smirk that felt rehearsed, brushing off my comment too quickly. Just felt like changing things up a bit. No harm in that, right? As the days passed, the late nights at work became increasingly frequent. I found myself texting him, striving to maintain a light-hearted tone, another long one tonight, babe? He would reply with assurances, sorry, this project is killing me. I won't be late, I promise. But the hours stretched into the early morning, and the clock would tick past midnight before I finally heard the sound of his keys in the door. I tried to shake off the nagging feeling that something was off, but it clung to me like a shadow, always present, always lurking. In a moment of desperation, I made the decision to hire a private detective. The thought felt absurd, like something ripped from the pages of a bad television drama, yet the need for answers was overwhelming. When the evidence arrived in a plain brown envelope, my heart sank. Inside were photographs that were as damning as they were heartbreaking, images of Alex with another woman, their closeness unmistakable, their shared intimacy frozen in time. Each picture felt like a dagger to my heart, severing the threads of trust and love that had held us together for years. But it was the audio recording that truly shattered me. Their conversations were filled with endearments and plans for a future together, leaving no room for doubt. They were in love, or at least, he was in love with her. Sitting there, the evidence spread out before me, a cold realization settled deep within me. This was the proof I never wanted to find, the anchor I could use in the stormy sea of a potential divorce. The photographs captured moments stolen from our life together, while the words exchanged between them betrayed every "I love you" Alex had ever whispered into my ear. Despite the crushing weight of this revelation, I made the agonizing choice to keep it all a secret, a painful burden I would carry alone for now. I wasn't ready to confront him, not yet. I needed a strategy, a way to navigate the wreckage of our marriage while preserving my dignity. The following days blurred into one another. Alex continued his charade, and I played my role perfectly, adopting the guise of the ideal wife with a smile fixed on my face, even as my heart shattered silently inside. Our conversations morphed into a careful dance around the truth, each word meticulously measured, every laugh forced. "Everything okay, Em? You've been unusually quiet," Alex would inquire, his concern seemingly genuine. "Yeah, just tired, you know. Work has been crazy," I would reply, the lie tasting bitter as it left my lips. I thought it was just another mundane day, until I stumbled upon a conversation that would change everything. As I walked past the slightly ajar door to Alex's office, I caught snippets of voices that piqued my interest. It was Alex and his mother, Judy, and their tone was serious, heavy with intent. "I'm telling you, Mom, I can't do this anymore. It's not just about the kids, I've lost all feeling for Emily. It's like we're roommates, not husband and wife." Alex's voice floated through the gap, strained and weary. Judy's response was sharp, laced with a cynicism that twisted my stomach into knots. "Well, of course you feel that way. She hasn't given you a child, and let's be honest, what else has she brought to this marriage?" The callousness in her voice felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "They were plotting against me, using me until it suited them to discard me. After we get a nice, expensive gift, we can kick her to the curb," Alex said, his voice cold and calculating. "Exactly, dear. Just bide your time a little longer," Judy confirmed, her voice dripping with malice. I stood there, rooted to the spot, a mixture of shock and anger boiling inside me. They were planning my exit from this family as casually as one would plan a grocery list. The hurt ran deep, but it ignited something within me, a burning desire for revenge. They thought they could use me and then toss me aside at their convenience. I would show them I wasn't just a pawn in their twisted game, I would take back control of my life. A few days later, the family dinner felt more like a theatrical farce than a heartfelt gathering. The clinking of silverware and the low murmur of conversation filled the air, but I could sense an undercurrent of tension, especially when Judy brought up her upcoming birthday. With the same smirk I had come to despise, she leaned in closer, her voice dripping with feigned sweetness. "So, Emily, dear, what are you planning for my birthday? Something special, I hope?" I locked eyes with her, my expression a carefully crafted mask of composure. Inside, however, my heart raced with a mix of determination and frustration. "Actually, Judy," I said, forcing a smile, "I was thinking of throwing you a dinner at the city's most luxurious restaurant, a night you won't forget." Her eyes lit up, sparkling with unrestrained greed, as she exchanged a quick, triumphant glance with Alex, her son. They thought they had me right where they wanted, convinced that I was simply playing the dutiful daughter-in-law. But little did they know, I was already 2 steps ahead of their twisted game. "Oh, Emily, that sounds absolutely delightful," she exclaimed, her voice loud enough to attract the attention of nearby tables, showcasing her love for the spotlight. "Just close family, you know? Let's keep it intimate." "Of course, Judy. It'll be our pleasure," I replied, the words feeling like bitter ash in my mouth as I forced myself to sound enthusiastic. The weeks leading up to Judy's 70th birthday loomed like a dark shadow, each smirk from her, every indifferent shrug from Alex, fueling my resolve. My plan was deceptively simple yet audacious, reminiscent of a plot twist from a dramatic film: host a lavish dinner under the guise of a loving gesture, only to drop a bombshell that would shatter their carefully constructed facade. But, as any seasoned plotter knows, the devil is always in the details. The night before the party, the tension in our home was thick enough to cut with a knife. Alex, blissfully oblivious to the emotional storm swirling around us, lounged on the couch, his attention absorbed by his phone. "Everything set for tomorrow?" he asked casually, not bothering to look up from the screen, his voice light and carefree, a stark contrast to the turmoil simmering inside me. "Oh, you could say that," I replied, my tone deliberately upbeat, trying to mask the chaos churning within. I had to keep my composure, I was on the verge of something monumental. Finally, the day arrived. As guests began to filter into the opulent dining room I had reserved for Judy's celebration, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. My heart raced, not from nerves but from the exhilarating adrenaline that surged through me, electrifying my senses in preparation for the showdown that lay ahead. Judy, ever the self-proclaimed queen of her realm, reveled in the attention, basking in the luxury of her surroundings with a satisfaction that was both amusing and infuriating. "Oh, Emily, you've truly outdone yourself. "This place is simply exquisite," she exclaimed, her voice rising to a pitch that drew the attention of several nearby diners. I could feel the weight of her insincerity, a palpable undercurrent that twisted my stomach. As we settled into our seats, the meal unfolded like a well-rehearsed play, each course punctuated by forced laughter and strained smiles. Stories were exchanged, the kind that surface during family gatherings, where everyone pretends to be content, while the tension lurked just beneath the surface. As dessert plates were cleared away, the waiter approached with the evening's climactic act, the bill. He leaned in discreetly, his voice low as he informed us that the dinner had come to a staggering $3,000. Without a moment's hesitation, I handed over my credit card, the gesture barely registering with most at the table. But the significance of that moment was profound to me. It marked a turning point, the final straw in a long battle of wills. Just as the atmosphere began to settle back into a semblance of normalcy, Alex, wearing a smirk that barely concealed his underlying malice, decided to drop his own bombshell. "Emily," he said, his voice steady and unyielding, "I think it's time everyone knew. I'm tired of this, of us. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, silencing the room as they reverberated off the walls, suffocating all other noise. Shocked gasps and murmurs swept through the guests, their faces a mixture of disbelief and curiosity as the reality of his declaration sank in. Before I could fully grasp the implications of what had just been said, Judy's voice sliced through the stunned silence, sharp and unforgiving. "Well then," she declared, her lips curling into a cruel smile, "since that's out in the open, I think it's best you leave, Emily. We're celebrating family tonight, and well, you're no longer part of it." The room fell deadly silent, every eye turning toward me, waiting to see how I would respond to this unexpected onslaught. But instead of crumbling, I found an unexpected calm within me. With a collected nod, I stood up, gathering the remnants of my dignity, and walked out of the restaurant without uttering a single word, the weight of their judgment pressing heavily on my back. The cool night air hit me like a slap as I stepped outside, the reality of everything that had just transpired washing over me in tumultuous waves. The streetlights flickered above me, casting a harsh glow on the path ahead. By the time I reached our apartment, clarity began to crystallize in my mind, a plan took shape amidst the chaos. I quickly packed my essentials, the initial numbness giving way to a cold, steely resolve. This was it, the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, a chance to reclaim my life from the clutches of their expectations. As I zipped the last suitcase, my phone erupted with relentless vibrations, the screen lighting up with notifications that I initially ignored. But as the buzzing persisted, I knew I had to confront whatever awaited me. The journey I was about to embark on was no longer just a reaction to their betrayals, it was a chance to redefine myself and embrace the freedom I had long yearned for. I tried to ignore the gnawing curiosity, but it quickly got the better of me. Judy's voice screeched through the phone, slicing through the quiet like a blade. "Emily, the payment didn't go through. You need to fix this now." The sweet, ironic satisfaction of my preparations for the inevitable filled me as I listened to her panic. I had meticulously secured my exit strategy, blocking the shared account that Alex would undoubtedly try to use against me. "Oh, Judy, that's unfortunate," I said, feigning sympathy. "But since I'm no longer part of the family, as you so eloquently put it, I'm afraid you'll have to sort this out yourselves." I could almost hear her outrage crackling through the line, and it was music to my ears. The chaos that followed was a fitting end to the farce my marriage had become. Word quickly spread about the restaurant staff demanding payment as Judy's tantrums escalated, eventually culminating in the arrival of the police to calm her stormy antics. Reports filtered back to me that it was Alex and his relatives who ultimately had to pool together the money to settle the bill. It felt like poetic justice for the betrayal and humiliation they had subjected me to. The morning after that disastrous dinner felt like waking up in the aftermath of a raging storm. I had my plan in place, my resolve solidified, and a set of divorce papers clutched firmly in my hand as I made my way back to what used to be our shared home for the last time. The moment I stepped through the door, the air crackled with tension so thick it felt suffocating. Alex and Judy were there, clearly in the middle of an argument. Their expressions morphed into one of united hostility the second they saw me. "You've got some nerve showing up here after last night," Alex spat, his face a mix of anger and disbelief. Judy, ever the viper, quickly added her venomous comments. "Ungrateful wretch. You embarrassed us in front of the whole city. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to have the police calm me down?" People were laughing and filming. I met their fury with a calmness I didn't feel. "Embarrassed? You think that's your biggest problem right now?" I tossed the divorce papers onto the table, along with the photos of Alex's infidelity that I had meticulously gathered. "You should be more concerned with this. The color drained from Alex's face as he picked up the photos, Judy peering over his shoulder. Their outrage morphed into shock, then into panic as they realized the extent of what I held in my hands. And let's not forget the prenup, shall we? I continued, my voice steady. You cheat, you pay. $100,000 to be exact. Judy's face twisted into a snarl. You wouldn't dare. You can't do this to us. Oh, but I can and I will, I replied coldly, the finality of my words hanging in the air. Alex, faced with the reality of the situation, switched tactics. Emily, please, let's talk about this. We can fix it. I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, hard laugh. Fix it? You think you can just undo everything with a few words? No, Alex, it's done. Judy, ever the manipulator, tried a softer approach. Her voice dripped with feigned concern. Emily, darling, think about what you're doing. This will ruin us. That ship has sailed, Judy. You should have thought about that before. Their pleading turned into a desperate scramble to salvage whatever they could, but my mind was made up. I was done being the victim, done with their lies and manipulations. In the end, Alex had no choice but to borrow money from his parents to pay me. As I left that house for the last time, check in hand, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. After everything that had gone down, I used the payout from Alex to put a down payment on a small but cozy place of my own. It's funny how much peace you can find within the walls of a space that belongs entirely to you, where every nook feels like a sanctuary from the chaos of the past. Life is quieter now, and I like it that way. I've got a job that keeps me busy, neighbors who nod and smile, and a little garden that's all mine to tend to. But every once in a while, the grapevine tosses a juicy tidbit my way about Alex and Judy. Just the other day, while grabbing coffee at the corner spot where locals gather, I bumped into someone from the old neighborhood. After the usual pleasantries, they leaned in, their voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Hey, have you heard about the latest drama with your ex and his mom? Curiosity mixed with detachment washed over me. Can't say that I have. Do tell. They seemed to savor the moment. Well, it seems Judy's not too pleased with Alex's new girlfriend. Word is they're at it like cats and dogs. Makes your situation look like a walk in the park. The conversation moved on, but as I walked away with my coffee, I couldn't shake the feeling of utter relief. There was a time when news like that would have sent me spiraling, but now? Now it was just another piece of someone else's story. These days, my biggest concern is whether my tomatoes will ripen before the squirrels get to them, or if I'll ever figure out yoga without looking like a newborn deer on ice. Life is simpler, quieter, and infinitely sweeter on this side of chaos.